Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Cone Dodger and welcome back to Automation, the car company tycoon game. Today we are starting a new series with a familiar vibe to it, and that is the Vector Automotive Challenge, version 2. This time around I have done some thinking. I've been really keeping this project in the back of my mind for quite a while now, and trying to make it a little bit more like what my original vision of starting a car company was like. That involves some changes to how the format is, and also I have figured out a way to maybe involve the community, involve you guys a little bit more with the ongoings of the startup of this company. So instead of just sitting here at the menu screen and going over the details, let's go ahead and go into the sandbox, and I'm going to start working on some engines. But these will all be engines, well, pretty much all the engines that we have seen before, that I have done recreations of in the past. So it's not too vital to me to be doing commentary of the build and stuff like that. That will be more important later on. So, the first thing that that will be different, I have changed, is the year. Last time we started in 1990, this time we're starting in 1998. And that change is somewhat due to the fact I didn't want to kind of just do a repeat of what we did before, and somewhat due to the fact that this challenge is a little bit different than before. Hold on, I'm going to move something so I can see my notepad and see the screen at the same time. There we go. Got it. Yeah, last time we kind of started a car company with the intention of starting a major car company. That doesn't really happen very often anymore. It does happen. We have some examples, such as, let's see, Kia and Hyundai. You know, they were startup companies of the last few decades. But I think they approach it much differently than I kind of approached it with our first Vector Automotive Challenge. You don't usually just go in guns a-blazing and introduce a whole lineup of cars. A lot of these startup car companies I see that get anywhere now, or have the ability to grow, start out more as a single car manufacturer. Even look at like a reference from today would be why am I forgetting the name? Oh, Tesla. They're not coming out and making a whole lineup of cars. They started with the I don't remember what it was called, but it was like an Elise with an electric motor. And then they moved on from that, where they made their first, you know, full-blown car, the Model S. And that was kind of basically how a car company is started. You use existing parts to try and build something that's unique, that has a place in a market that isn't currently occupied. But you have the freedom of using existing parts and not having to engineer yourself everything for a car. And then you use the momentum of that first car to basically launch your car company into the ability to make other cars. So that is kind of what we are going to go for this time around. I'm going to build a car first, but we're going to build our first car in 1998 with existing parts for the most part. And what I mean by that is, say, an engine and a drivetrain. We're going to take and recreate existing engines from 1998, and we're going to choose from one of those, choose from a few of those, one engine that, or one transmission, things like that, that we want to use. And they will have different impacts on how the company is shaped, different impacts on how the car, what kind of car we're talking about here. And this is where you guys are going to come into play a little bit. For this episode, I am going to build 4 different engines, and of those, we will choose one based on what kind of car we want to build and what kind of unique characteristics they have that could kind of give us a unique product for 1998. I chose 1998 because it's basically the end of an era to me. It was right when sports cars died. There was this kind of dead period at the end of the 90s and the early 2000s where the word sports GT, or the phrase sports GT, sports cars in general, kind of went out of vogue. It was almost like you couldn't say those words anymore. That was not something you should be making anymore. Now keep in mind, I will again be shaping this company mostly around an Asian automotive manufacturer, but not necessarily, so we don't have to restrict ourselves to that. We're just a unique manufacturer in this year building a car. There's no restrictions on where they are built or who we have to model ourselves against in that regard. But look at it this way, we lost the RX-7 by this point, the 3000 GT, the Supra, the 300ZX, and the Z in general. Nissan was not making any kind of sports car. The Camaro and the Firebird were still around, but not for much longer. This was pretty much the beginning of the end of that era too. This generation of F-body didn't go over very well. Ford still had the Mustang, but other than that, there was pretty much nothing. So that's the void I want to try and fill. I want to try and make something that is more affordable than a Camaro, more affordable than all of the now defunct big GT cars from Japan, but still has sports car in its veins. And that's kind of the only thing we're locked into. What caliber of sports car that is, what kind of statistics it has, that's all up in the air. That's for us to decide, of course, through the course of the series. But really, when I was trying to formulate this all in my brain, the engine is what is the basis of what this car is going to be. So that's where we're starting. Already in this cluster of engines, we will find the 4 engines that we have to choose from, and they are all labeled under the Vector name, so I could find them. The first of which is the LS1. This engine debuted right around 1998, and in its era wasn't really well known. It wasn't quite as famous as it is today, but we know now with our extended knowledge that it is a very versatile, small, compact, high output engine that has an aluminum block, aluminum head, and produces 311 horsepower in the configuration of 1998, and that is the engine we will be receiving, if you will. That is the one we have to choose from. It has a material cost of $1,564, so that's one thing to consider. It requires 234.3 kilojoules per second of cooling, which is not terrible. And none of these engines should be too restrictive in that regard. It has a responsiveness of 39.1, smoothness of about 60, loudness about 33, that's pretty much irrelevant. Okay, so along those same lines, we also have a Toyota V8 to choose from, the 1UZ FE, which is $1,361, so what is that in comparison? It is actually slightly cheaper than the LS1, and it does produce slightly less horsepower, 291, but it is smaller. Let's look at, is the weight on here? It is not. But it is a smaller engine at just under 4 liters, so 291 horsepower, 269 foot-pounds of torque. It has a responsiveness of 42.7, so it is slightly more responsive. It has a smoothness of 64.5, so it is slightly smoother. Let's see, the required cooling is virtually identical. Other than that, there is pretty much what we have to keep in mind. Reliability 67.7, 64.9, so it's slightly more reliable than the LS1 as well. Economy 21.3 versus 21.6, so virtually the same there as well. So those are the 2 V8s to choose from. But we don't necessarily have to build a car that is quote-unquote that fast. It doesn't have to be a big loud V8 powered car. We have some other ones to choose from. And the first of which is dramatically different. Okay, that is not the right picture, but this is the B18, which I have slightly modified. So this engine ends up being pretty significantly cheaper than the other ones. So in order to get it to be reliable enough but have the horsepower that we need. I have gone up to pretty much the late 90s Integra Type R configuration, and it gives us 183 horsepower at 7,900 RPM, which is not quite the number that Honda was able to produce in this era, but the simulation and automation, boy that rolls right off the tongue, doesn't quite balance out with an engine of this caliber in 1998, so it's slightly restricted. However, it is still significantly cheaper. Material cost of about $764. The man hours, I believe, are slightly higher, but its overall cost is still lower. Reliability is right up there with everybody else at 59.8. Economy is actually lower at 18.35. I think I can tune that to be pretty much on par with the other ones. But overall, we'll still probably get better miles per gallon with this engine versus the others. We'll see. Maybe I can tune that up a little bit later on. Responsiveness 45.8, so it is better than the other two. Smoothness is better than the LS, but similar to the 1UZ. But overall, this engine choice would just give us a much different direction to take this car with. We obviously don't know what kind of chassis we're going with, we don't know what kind of body we're going with, how big of a car, so choosing this one will have an impact on the future. We could even go front-wheel drive with this engine. We could go all-wheel drive, front-wheel drive based all-wheel drive. There's a lot of variability available with choosing this engine. Also, we have something that I have never built before, and that is a BMW engine. This is the M52 B28, which did debut in 1998, so it's right up in this era. Cost-wise, $1,037. So it is kind of in the mid-range of cost. Reliability is high, 63.3, and this engine is known for its reliability. Economy is right in line with the others, besides that at B18, which, again, I will have to work on that. Responsiveness is a little bit lower, 42. Smoothness, inline 6, super high, 79.2. So, if we're going to build a car that is highly refined, this might be a good choice with that high smoothness. Anything else of interest? Oh yeah, that horsepower number, 192 horsepower at 6,400 RPM. So there is the basic stats for this guy. So, now where do we go from here? In the description, and probably in a pop-up link that will be shown somewhere here-ish, there will be a straw poll. You guys get to choose which engine our company will base our first car around. I will have the final say in it, so I will have somewhat of a weighted vote in it, but what you guys pick, the majority vote on you guys' pick is definitely going to be a huge contributor in which one I choose. So this is the introduction to the second Vector Automotive Challenge. This episode's probably a little bit weird because there's not a whole lot of building going on. Obviously there was some building you saw like behind the scenes there, but basically we need to choose an engine before we can start the actual nitty-gritty of building a car. So which one of these do you think we should choose? Let me know, and next week we will find out, and we'll start building a car. But we're going to keep on this theme. We're going to be using some elements from other cars. There's some stuff we will have to build, and we can't just buy everything from everybody else. The basic chassis, the suspension work, things like that is stuff we will be designing in-house. I considered maybe replicating another car, because that's certainly something that has happened, and happens often with startup companies, is that you'll take another company's chassis and build your own car off of that. I decided not to go that route. I think we can at least manage to build a chassis in-house, but we're going to have a lot of options in that regard, because this will likely be a low production car, so keep that in mind. Alrighty, the decision is with you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.